Hello and welcome to See Hear Love. I'm your host, Melinda Estabrooks, and today we celebrate and honor our fathers and share what we admire about them and what we've learned from them. Now, to be honest, not everybody is going to have the same father experiences as we do, and we recognize that, we know that. So we'll be discussing that as well throughout the show. We'll also be discussing what it means to have God as our father, and it's going to be really great as we explore what does that mean if we don't have a dad, if we've had a tough time growing up with our fathers. This part of the show will really encourage you that you do have a father that loves you and that wants the best for you. And so to help me do all of this, I'm joined by my co-hosts and bloggers and social media interviews and amazing, talented women around me, Cheryl, Jen, Joanna, and Abby. Welcome, you guys.
Hey.
Great to be all together.
Nice to be back.
Yes,
Yeah.
so great. So let's start off, about our dads. What's one thing about your father that you would say that you admire, that you respect about him? And as you say it, we'll put up a picture of him too. So what would you say, admire, respect, or a character, or even something that he's done that you really admire? Joanna?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out most to me about my dad is he's very stable. Mm-hmm. So that means he's also not very emotional, but he's sort of a steady and stable force. So if he said he was going to do something, he would do it. And if he said we as a family were going to do something, we were doing it. So I think I've shared on the show before, like, to my great horror and humiliation, we read the Bible every night together at dinner. Even if I had friends over for dinner, he would bring out the Bible and I would be like, shrinking into my chair as a kid because I was it wasn't cool to read the Bible with your friends around. But basically he determined that by the time we left his house, we would know the Bible. We would have to make a choice for ourselves, but we would know the book. And so he was very steady and stable in those kinds of things.
I like that. Yeah. Steady and stable. Okay. Cool. Abby?
My dad is the sweetest, cutest man ever. And he is a really incredible balance of loving and sensitive and justice and right, like making sure things are right and standing up for when they're not. And I really appreciate that balance. He is, one of the things I really admire is his entrepreneurial spirit. He's a successful entrepreneur. He's built his own business from the ground up for, I think it's been 30 plus years. And he supported our family with his own business, and I just think that's the coolest thing because as a young woman trying to run my own kind of businesses along the side, it's impressive to think about that. So yeah.
That's good. I would say I admire about my dad at 75, the energy level of this man. Traveling around the world still, preaching the gospel, writing blogs, going on radio. He doesn't believe in retirement. He believes that, when you are still healthy and can do it, you do, and you serve God. And so there he is, like, knowing how to edit videos and on social media. I'm not even kidding. And he has this Apple phone, and he's just in it because he's like, if I'm going to connect with, this generation, then I've got to know this. And so he learns stuff, and he watches YouTube. So you are never too old. And I look at my dad, and I admire that kind of tenacity to just learn and the energy. And I believe it's totally a God energy, because at that age, it's just like he is just going and still quite young. So I really admire that about him.
Yeah,
so cool. Yeah. Jen, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, my dad, it's a quiet strength, and it always surprises everybody because he's very quiet, and yet he seems to know people in all corners of the earth, and it's actually, like, people speculate he might be CIA, but so, and I know for times for me, it's, I found myself in predicaments, and he just, if I go to him, he will handle it. So it is, I think a lot of my views of God are that kind of, if you go to him, he will handle it, in a quiet way. So yeah, I would have to say, that's what I admire. I didn't inherit any of that, by the way. I'm like hysterical all the time, but I'm glad he is not.
Okay, that's good. Cheryl?
So I didn't grow up with my father. He wasn't in my life until I became an adult, and then we reconciled. But in getting to know him in my adult life, I am a shadow of him, mirror of him. He's very driven, rose to the top in the Caribbean in insurance. And when he drives along the street, one of the things I do remember is everybody knew his name. And, you know, he really believed in serving his community, and I'd like to think I get that from him. I like to pull that down. And I love his heart for his grandkids. You know, reconciliation is a tricky thing, especially when years of water flow under that bridge. And I just love to see how he's reaching out to my kids. So so I'm looking at him as a granddad. It's a different, yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So we talked about what we admire the most of our dads, but what's the one thing that he has taught you or passed on to you that has impacted the way you live, whether it's the adverse, the opposite way, or that way? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what is the one thing that he has given you or you watched and said, okay, because of that, I am now living this way? What would you say, Jen?
For me, I would say it's intellectual curiosity. I mean, he's in his 70s and he's still reading everything on the New York Times bestseller list, and you know, whether it's like the history of salt or, you know, the latest kind of political memoir.
I love it.
The history of salt.
That was one of the books he read. And he has a photographic memory, so he will speak at length about the history of salt. So, but I think, like, I don't get the, you know, stoic strength from him, but I do get the intellectual curiosity, I think. So.
And he was always like that. Like
he was always like that. Like as a kid, and even my daughter, because he's like, you know, how would you like a book on the history of calculus? And she's like, she's 14. She's like, oh, not so much, Grandpa. Right, no thanks.
Yeah.
But so he does, I think, pass that on. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Abby, what about you?
His networking abilities, I definitely come by. Yeah. So, to be honest, his business, it's of course been successful, but he hardly uses technology. It is all built on relationship.
Wow.
And he will meet somebody, have met somebody 10, 20 years ago, see them walking down the street and be like, oh, that's so-and-so. I wonder how his sister's doing or something. Like, he remembers these details. Now, that part I didn't get as well. I'm not the best at remembering those little details. I am getting better. But yeah, meeting people anywhere I go, that is completely from my dad. And I love it. I love meeting people. I love getting to know their story, all of that kind of stuff. So that's something I'm quite proud to have gained from him.
That's really cool. Joanna, what about you?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you've lived with anyone for that, like, they're gonna teach you. I mean, I don't know how I don't even know where to begin with. Like, what are the things he gave to me? I mean, everything. But I was recently in Holland, which is where my dad is from. My dad isn't able to travel anymore with his health, so my mom and I went on his behalf to deal with some family affairs and say goodbye to some people there. And every time I go to Holland, I've been about 15 times, and every time I go, I'm reminded of what I thought was just kind of our little family is actually like a Dutch thing. And so I realize how much of my approach to life is quite Dutch. And my mom rolls her eyes about it sometimes. Oh, you're just like your dad. But I think some of it is about how I'm not interested in the frivolous. And I think you know that about me on this show. It's just none of this nonsense. Like, it's sort of a matter of fact way of living. And he grew up in the war era and post-war era in Europe where I mean, people were starving to death when he was born. And so you don't waste food, and you repair the thing, you don't buy a new one, and all these kinds of traits that I think I carry too. You know, you don't need all this extra stuff. You just need the simple stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Cheryl.
I think the biggest lesson that my dad taught me, which has changed my parenting and changed me as a person, is humility. You know, I'm raised in a Caribbean culture, and those from the African diaspora can attest. There's this sort of because I said so, and it's heavy. There's lots of layers to it, but you're a child and you're always reminded. And my dad taught me in that moment of reconciliation and to this day that you can never be too old, too far, too whatever to say, you know what, I am sorry. I was wrong. And so I have learned as a parent to not lord my adulthood over my children. if I am wrong, I am wrong. And we fear in our culture the equalism of things, like I am not equal to you and don't you be, but there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, actually, you've taught me something tonight, guys. I'm sorry about that.
Wow.
Thank you for that. It just does so much.
Yeah.
It does so much for that child.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think for me, what I've taken from my dad, and I think that I model it, is there's a courage and this tenacity I think it's to share my faith, but also to be really brave. When I look at my dad, he goes across the world and as a missionary when everybody said don't. Then he's a Bible smuggler in countries where the church is persecuted and it's very dangerous. And then he trains pastors in persecuted countries, even though it's dangerous, because he believes that they need to be trained on how to read, the scriptures. It's courage, and courage based on this motivation that God has given his calling to share Jesus with the world.
Yeah.
And so there is that part, like he is really a courageous man. And there was a lot of opposition, there's a lot of no's, people didn't want, but he just kept going and pursuing the things that God had for him. And I think that's why now at like 75, he's at that place. I think the faithfulness and obedience and perseverance and commitment to the call and to what God has for you puts you here at this age. And I really believe that. And so I think that part of what I've taken away from watching my dad is that you go after it, you trust, you have no clue where you're going, but God will show you. Amen. And what a ride. And it's been an adventure. I think I look at my parents' life and it's an adventure. Like you go, wow, is that really a real life? And then for me, like I hope my life is, an adventure and one that's made an impact on the world. And so I really take that and hold that close. Thank you. Those are really great things that our dads have given to us. And I think we need to acknowledge too that as people are listening, not everybody has this experience. Not everybody has, a dad. Not everybody has had a positive experience with their dad. There are many stories of different situations that many people fall into. And so I think that we need to remind ourselves again that if we don't have a great experience, that we have God as Father, who is the loving, kind, generous, faithful, who will never leave you, Father. He is the Father that is with you, who has your back, that walks into the war with you. And I think that we need to be reminded, and our viewers need to be reminded that that's God as Father. And so I think that's a really key part of, as we honor and celebrate our fathers this week. But when we think of God as our Father, like think about God in that role as Father, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? A word, a picture, or scripture? Like when I say God is Father, and you're explaining to somebody who doesn't know him, what would you say? What would you say to him in that father role?
The first word that comes to my mind is comforter.
Okay.
So, I don't know if that's in relation to my relationship with my dad, which I very much think it could be, because my dad's always, his like to snuggle up next to him. I still do that at my age because he's always that's all he wants. He just wants to be there. So God as Father to me equals comfort.
Comfort. So when you're going through a difficult time, you know that he will comfort you.
I'm Daddy's little girl very easily.
That's good. Good. Jen, what about you?
For me, it's protector, and again, maybe it comes from the my own experience with my dad. But for me, God is Clint Eastwood. He is nobody else. He's Clint Eastwood. I mean, not necessarily Dirty Harry, but Clint Eastwood. So it's.
I don't know what these references are.
I know. For the millennials over here at this side of the table, they're like
Harry,
Clint Eastwood, of course.
I know
So protector, and what does that mean? So when you say that, and somebody's like protector, how's God as Father protector?
I mean, sometimes it's protector, physical protector, financial protector growing up. And I think sometimes it's like protecting you from yourself, like telling you like this is a really bad path to here.
Every word for him. Love it.
You're going down a bad path here. So sometimes it's that kind of words of wisdom as protection. It's not always that like warrior protector. Sometimes it's that breathing wisdom into your life protector.
So God, when you say as Father, he is a protector. That's what he does. He protects you from yourself, or can also protect you from sort of the outside elements, circumstances.
Yeah, it's that righteous right hand, but it's also that still small voice. I think it's a real balance.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So we've got comforter and we have protector. Joanna?
I mean, I don't have the kind of relationship with my father that's like warm and fuzzy. he's not an emotional person, and I am highly emotional, and so there's nothing about the cuddling like that weirds me out. I would never do that with my dad. I love him, I respect him, and that's not the relationship we have. So in the same way I said he was stable and steady, I think of God the Father as faithful and stable and steady. He is a rock. He is trustworthy. He shall not be moved. If he says it, it will happen. And I think actually that part of my dad has allowed me to have great faith in spite of circumstances, because if he said he would do it, and it says it right here in the Bible, he says this, I don't know why we don't believe it, he said it. And like that's my dad. Like if he said we are not gonna have ice cream, it doesn't matter how many times you ask, there will be no ice cream. But with my mother, okay, like maybe a little ice cream. But like with my dad, if there's no ice cream, and then in the positive, right? Like we're going to church every single week, and you will come with me. Like stable. He never wavered. Every morning he would be reading that Bible at the table by himself. Like if he said he was helping you with your homework, if he said he was gonna drive you somewhere, like he was always gonna do it.
So faithful and stable.
Yeah,
That's really
But we're just probably not gonna cuddle about it.
My dad would feed me ice cream. He'd see a Dairy Queen commercial and we were gone.
Cheryl, for you, as father.
Yeah, well, if God is like Clint Eastwood for you, God's like Liam Neeson for me.
Okay.
3 words: Daddy the Rescuer. You know, I think about that, the whole Taken series. Love that film. And you know, there's a song right now that just really hits me about there's no mountain that you won't tear down. There's no, like, you're coming after me, that God fights for me and he'll rescue me. And you just cry out like, Daddy, and he just will break everything down. That, you know, the big bad wolves and the scary things, and he just rescues. And that's always been my view of him.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I say for me too, I mean, there's a part of like this Redeemer, the one who redeems all things, because in my life, you know, I see it from my dad, but even, especially with God, that I was given second chances. And though the world said, this is you and what you've done puts you here, God was like, oh no, I don't see that in you. I'm going to redeem the situation and put you here. So there's that part. But also I would say, for me, I think adopter. I think being adopted and that whole idea that we are adopted into God's family and given a new name is so hopeful. I had no name. When I was born, my name was Baby. It was Baby Adarasia, named after my birth mom, just her first name. So it was Baby, and they just, no name. And then to be adopted and given a name, that means for me, Melinda, beautiful changes how you live. No name of nothing to, you know, beautiful and brought into a family and to belong. So I really see that as God. Like he is the adopter of those who are orphaned, who are broken, who are forgotten, who are left at the side of the road, whose mom couldn't take care of her. He will adopt and give you a new name and a new life. And so that, to me, I'm just like, that's who I see as God. Because he sees that, right? All over. He doesn't miss those kids forgotten. He sees them and he adopts. And so I think those are things. So that's beautiful. So we've got rescuer, protector, adopter, redeemer, comforter, and faithful one. Like, that's a great dad. Hello. And to every man out there, just so you know, those are really key things. You know, there's a scripture verse in the Bible that is a beautiful one, of a picture of God as Father, and it's in Isaiah 64:8, and it says, "And yet, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay, and you are the potter. We all are formed by your hand." And I think as we look at, you know, again, you know, some of us had great experiences with our dads, and some of us haven't, and many that are watching haven't as well. This is a beautiful verse. Just want to spend some time talking about that before the end of the show. When we say that, let's start with, you know, that he is our Father. That's sort of the first line. He is our Father. That's incredible. Like, God is our Father. How does that make you feel when you hear that part of the verse?
When I'm thinking about this potter and I'm listening to the words we would use to describe about God, whether based on negative or positive experiences with our dad, it brings me to this like peaceful knowledge that for whatever reason, God chose which family to set us in and which kind of father he wanted us to have. Like, there was no mistake. And so the kind of people we are today is very much connected to the type of parents that we had, that he set us into. I mean, it's connected to many things, but that, like, he formed and shaped us to go in this particular family, in this particular location, in this particular time. And that the things that we've been given, because I love that, like, we get a full picture of God when we all join together. And so that, like, one of us gets the humility, and one of us gets the comforter, and one of us gets the strength, and one of us gets the Clint Eastwood. And, you know, we get this whole picture together, but we all need to bring that to the table because it's all true. It is all God, but that for whatever reason, and we have to come through, you know, probably a lot of counseling to come to accept the Father he chose to give us, that it is the one we have been molded for. And so there's something about how we are shaped that is particularly because of the kind of dad we have, which is then going to affect how we play out our life in the world.
Right. I want to speak to that, what you said, because when I was reading this verse, I actually saw it in the sense of those who might feel gypped by how they were molded by their earthly father. So in the sense of maybe they aren't pleased with the family that they got put in, or they haven't had a great experience, but God's our Father, and God's the one who molds us. So it doesn't matter what our experience is on earth. We have this Father with all of these qualities, and we get to be, if we allow him to, we get to be remolded or reshaped, or, you know, and I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, that is. So good. Jen, what about your thoughts?
I mean, for me, the imagery is a relief, because I think there are all things about ourselves that we don't like, right? Whether it's, you know, physical or spiritual or mental or emotional, but that we were formed by God. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen potters work. You know, they go to these little clay studios or whatever, but, you know, if it's not a good pot, it doesn't come off the wheel. Right. So the fact that we're formed out of clay, it's this, we have been perfected. Even in our imperfections, we are perfect in his eyes. So whether we're viewed by society as that or our parents as that, it actually doesn't matter, because he made us perfect for his mission for us.
Formed by his hands.
Formed by his
For a
hands.
particular purpose.
For a particular purpose.
Some of us are a cup, and some of us are molded into a bowl, and some of us, but wherever we're shaped into, it's going to affect how we get to live out in the world.
I love that.
Yeah.
Cheryl, lots of tears.
Sorry. Gratitude. 100% gratitude. That no matter how broken and shattered, empty, dark our lives could be, that God, in his mercy and his love, can step in and replace anything that we feel is lost, gypped, not quite what we want.
Yeah.
I am so thankful that my God is my Father in the absence. And for anyone that is fatherless right now, I know how hard these days are for you, because they're hard for me too. But God is your Father, and he loves you so much. And his love just fills you up to overflow and fills every crack. There is no void in him. There is no void in him.
It's a couple of times I've just wanted to stop and say, preach, and that's one of them, so there you go.
There is no void.
So good. No, this is so good.
When I think of the potter, I think of the time spent. You know, he's sitting there and he's crafting and he's looking and he's spending time and he's thinking and maybe he's singing a worship song, and because I really take it as him there and thinking and dreaming of what it's going to be. Right. I think this one's going to be a cup, or this one's going to be a bowl or a pitcher. And this one might have color, might throw in a little like sparkle for Cheryl, you know, and some cool glasses and very practical things, handles for Joanna, and, you know, a really cool funky shape, and, you know, for Abby, and then of course my fashionista Jen, and it's all some
diamonds.
Yeah, little whatever it is. Like, he's thinking this, and so he's crafting it, he's looking, and then I love it because he's creating this for us to then, you know, be used and to be used. Because, you know, like a bowl isn't just supposed to be sit there. It's actually to hold things and water or life-giving food and nourishment or whatever that is. And so when he says we're the work of his hands, then for all the people who are like, I'm worthless, I'm not good enough, I'm depressed, we see the numbers of suicide rates and people just completely undone, that my life's not worth anything.
Yeah.
You have to stop and pause with this verse, that if the God of the universe is the potter creating you and making you to be used for something great, and great can mean many different things, then you matter. Like this can't be like, I don't matter and I'm done with my life. There is a reason why the potter has made you, with his hands.
So good.
And so my heart bursts. Like I think it's just because we see the world and the great need of people to be reminded of the Father, because there is so much sadness and so much death and so much depression, and people just like, what's the point of life? And this just kind of centers us back to be reminded of who loves us and whose we are, right? So it's a beautiful thing.
I love that.
It's a beautiful verse.
Have any of you heard of that Japanese pottery that's
Where they do the
mended
gold.
with gold?
Yeah.
I never remember the name, but just as you're speaking, I'm thinking like, some thoughts that may be going through people's head is, oh yeah, but I've been broken. I'm broken pottery, or I'm, it's too hard. But then you look at this, the way that the Japanese repair pottery with gold, and it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. But then it becomes this like priceless piece,
Even more valuable.
Yeah,
Exactly, and the uses it's used for are then more specialized and rare, right? And so that's just an encouragement, I think. But I think we have to allow ourselves to be mended, right? And allow God to pick us back up and put us back together.
Yeah, and it's again that like he chose what to make us and where to put us, and what like he chose what kind of bowl to make, what color of bowl it would be, what purpose it would have, and where on the shelf in the family of bowls it would live. And like there's at some level a need, which is like, I'm going to save everybody a lot of money on counseling if they can do this at home. I mean, most people need to go through the counseling for it, but if we can accept where we are, accept ourselves, and the circumstances that life has brought us, as just accept it. It is what it is. It actually frees us to move forward and be all that we were meant to be, instead of spending all the time
That it
wishing.
shaped us, right?
And it shaped us and wishing. We all wish there was stuff about our life and our dads that was different, but that's not how it is. So when we come to accept, and we are freed to actually be used.
So great. Thank you. Thank you all just for sharing.
So good.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts of your dad, honoring them, and just sharing things about them that we've taken into our own lives. But I think even more importantly, just sharing about God. And maybe just gushing on God, and maybe that's it, right? We have to like hashtag gush on God, or make a day in the week of that, because I think we don't do that enough about just how great He is and what He has done for us and how much He has loved us right from the beginning. And to you, our viewers, thanks for joining us as, we gushed on God and we talked about our dads and what has impacted us about their lives, and we just wanted to honor them today as well. But for those with a very opposite father experience than ours, we hope that you were encouraged and reassured and reminded today that you do have a Father, that He is the potter, you are the clay, and that you are the work of His hands. He's a loving, gracious, ever-present Father that will never leave you, that is always for you, and that wants the best for you as well. And He will save you, and He does love you unconditionally. We just want you to know that. And if we can help you in any way or pray for you or resource you more about God as your Father, then please connect with us on Facebook or Instagram or seehearlove.com. We'd love to hear from you and pray for you. And always know that your Father, God, sees you, hears you, and deeply, deeply loves you. Bye-bye.